This is the Fire Dog Podcast.
The views and opinions presented on today's episode are those of the speaker and do not necessarily represent the views of the Department of Defense or the United States Air Force.
Welcome, my name is Matt Wilson. Thank you for joining us for episode 5 of the Fire Dog Podcast. Our topic of discussion today is on bridging the gap between active duty and Guard Reserve firefighters. We spend a lot of time together, both in garrison on deployments. What can each of us do to improve our working relationship? Our guest today is joining us from Dover, Pennsylvania. He served 7 years as an active duty firefighter. He's a member of the Maryland Air National Guard, and he currently serves as a firefighter at the U.S. Army Garrison Carlisle Barracks Fire Department in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, which is home to the U.S. Army War College. Please welcome Matt Portka. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. Matt and I go way back. We were stationed at Tyndall together. We actually lived next door to each other. We were neighbors at one point. Anyways, we'll get into some questions here, Matt. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? Where do you work now?
So originally I'm from Apollo, Pennsylvania. It's a small little town northeast of Pittsburgh. Currently I live in Dover, Pennsylvania. A lot of people confuse it with Dover, Delaware, but there's a town in Pennsylvania called Dover. I was active duty for 7 years. After getting out, I went to the Air Force Reserves for 2 years. And my reserve unit closed down, and that's when I transitioned to the Air National Guard, which is where I've been since 2015. After I got out of the military, I started working for a civilian fire department in Maryland, a county department. And after working there for about 3 years, I went back into the federal system as a federal civilian firefighter. And that's what I've been doing since. I've been here at Carlisle since about 2016. And I'm coming up on 4 years here in a few short months. That's a little bit about me.
Yeah. Awesome. So you served 7 years active duty.
I did, yes.
So what made you want to transition over?
So when I joined the military, I came in as a firefighter because that's what I wanted to do. My end goal for joining was to get the training and experience and then transition into a civilian fire career, which I did eventually. After coming up on my first enlistment, I didn't have anything to go to. I didn't have any jobs lined up or any leads on anything. So I decided to re-enlist for another 4 years. So after re-enlisting, that's when I got the orders down to Florida. I made it a goal of mine by the end of my second enlistment, which would have put me at 8 years, to transition from active military into a civilian career. I actually transitioned a little bit earlier than I wanted. For those that may not realize, if you get a set of orders to somewhere and you deny them, they force you out. Or I should say, I wouldn't say they force you out. It makes you ineligible to re-enlist. And I had done that. And during that time after that I had denied the orders, that's whenever they were forcing a lot of people out for all kinds of reasons. So in the big picture, I had a code that said I couldn't re-enlist. It wasn't like a negative thing, but it just says in the big system that I couldn't re-enlist. So they pushed my date of separation up by like a year and a half. And it was actually right after my daughter was born. I came off paternity leave in March. And when I got back to work, that's when they told me, hey, your date of separation's been moved up. You're getting out at the end of May. It was a shocker, to say the least. But at the time, I was going through a hiring process for the county department that I eventually got hired at. But when I did get out, I still didn't have a job to walk into. Luckily, though, I got a phone call about a month later that said I got hired. So I consider myself lucky, to say the least, that I was able to do that.
So what's some advice you can give people? So you kind of sounds like you were taken by surprise. They were like, hey, see you later. Thanks for playing. Actually, where did you have orders to?
Kadena.
Oh, okay. And you and the wife didn't want to go that route, huh? Well, you had plans already to kind of get out and do that anyways, right?
I did. So I think for me, it was, if I took the orders, then I was going to be a lifer. And while that wouldn't have been a bad decision whatsoever, ultimately it's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a civilian firefighter somewhere. So I made the decision to just deny the orders, knowing full well that it would make me ineligible to reenlist. But I was going after that goal of mine that I wanted.
You're right there at that threshold. I've heard people say before, 10 years. If you stay in longer than 10 years, you might as well do cross the finish line for the 20. So I think you got out right at the right time.
Absolutely.
So what's some advice you can give people? You said you were kind of taken by surprise. You come off paternity leave and they're telling you, hey, see you later. Some advice you can give. It sounds like you were set up for success, or you were already kind of preparing. What can people do that maybe they plan on getting out, and if they need to prepare for getting kicked out a little bit earlier than they thought? Because you were sitting around without an official job offer, actual job, right?
Right.
Yeah. So what can people do to prepare for that moment?
I guess I would say if you have the means to do it, depending on what your goal is, if you want to be a federal firefighter or work for a regular municipal department, if you have the means to do it, go take as many tests. And I guess by tests, I mean civil service exams or fire departments that you would like to work at, or if you're trying to get back to a certain area. For me, I was trying to get back closer to home. And whenever I saw this job posting for down in Maryland, I said, that's pretty close to home. It's only about 3 or 4 hours. But if you have the means to do it, take as many tests as you can, go for the interviews, mentally and physically prepare yourself, because a lot of the civilian departments require you to do the CPAT test, which is it's just a physical agility test. And, go for it. That's really all I can say. Take that leap. Don't be afraid to follow your dreams, if you will. That's what I did. I knew that even though I was getting out, I was still going to continue my time in the reserves or the Guard, just to keep that time going. I gave 7 years active duty. I might as well stick it out for another 13 part-time and get something out of it. So
yeah, I'd say you made a good choice. What was that like, that transition from active duty to Guard, or even active duty to civilian life? I mean, you have a little bit of life experiences prior to active duty, but it's kind of a shocker, I've heard.
It can be. It's definitely a little bit of a culture shock. I would say the transition at first into civilian life wasn't too bad. I was jobless for about 2 months until I actually started the fire academy. So I didn't have that sort of regiment that people think of when it comes to the military. There's definitely a lot of differences in the way active and reserve and Guard personnel operate.
Yeah, that kind of brings us into my next point. So I think most of our listeners have a general idea of the differences that you talk about between active duty, Guard, and reserve, or at least they think they know what the differences are. So considering you've done both, you've done time with both, can you explain just a few of those differences? Maybe what are some strengths and weaknesses of each? We'll just stick with Guard versus active duty, I guess.
Sure. So, when I was active duty, we had training requirements. Every month we had to do a certain amount of training, and annually we had to do certain things, like we had to have our live fire burns, structural and aircraft. But one of those differences between the two is like active duty is there all the time. So they have a year to complete all this stuff. You guys work shift work and you have that time. In the Guard, we have those same training requirements. We still have to complete X amount of training, same as you guys. However, we have 2 days a month to complete that. Now, we do take what we call deployments for training, or DFTs. We take, that's when when you hear the whole 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year, that 2 weeks a year is when we accomplish our live fire training. And really, we go to all sorts of different places to do that. But, it's like training wise, those are just a couple differences between the two.
Yeah, I've always thought about that. I mean, 1 weekend a month, we have so much to do with training and active duty, I mean, every day seems to be consumed with, which there's a lot of day-to-day tasks that we have to deal with, obviously, but training, it takes a lot to accomplish that. I don't know how you do that in one weekend.
And those CBTs that we all love to do every single year, we have to do those same CBTs in the Guard and the reserves, when I was in the reserves as well.
So you just show up and you knock out a bunch of CBTs, huh?
Sometimes, yes, they have to get done. It's a requirement. Unfortunately, we have to do it. So in that sense, we share the same struggles as you guys do, because nobody likes to do those CBTs.
Yeah, I can empathize with you a little bit there. Yeah, at least we have a whole year to do them versus 2 days once a month. So what are some strengths of the Guard? I mean, compared to active duty, what are some strengths?
I would say my current Guard Fire Department, about 98% of our personnel are career firefighters somewhere, be it federal, county, or city. We're firefighters somewhere. And everybody brings a different level of experience. I would say primarily structural experience. We do have a few guys who are airport firefighters at major airports. So we do have some guys who are exposed to the crash side more than others. But when it comes to structural firefighting, I mean, I work with some of the smartest individuals I've ever met in my career. We've got battalion chiefs, captains, lieutenants for big departments, guys who drive some of the busiest fire engines in the nation. So we have a very large wealth of knowledge and experience in our department. When it comes to aircraft firefighting, I'm not going to say that we don't have experience, because we do, but we aren't as exposed to it as much as active duty is. We have A-10s at our base, and that's what we're really good with. We're really good with the A-10 aircraft. However, we don't get a lot of transient aircraft in there. And even when we do, it could be during the week, or it could be that within that month time frame that we're not there until till the next drill weekend. So sometimes we look to the active duty side saying, okay, you guys are familiar with this aircraft, us not so much. What can you teach us?
Yeah, so a lot of experience in the Guard, clearly. Battalion chiefs, captains, guys that work in the cities, or in Maryland or Pennsylvania in your case. So, as you know and have experienced active duty, Guard, reserve firefighters, we always have the opportunity to work and deploy with each other. We got some reserve firefighters here at Langley just last year to kind of augment us during deployment. So what are some things active duty or civilian firefighters assigned to active duty bases can do to improve the working relationship with Guard and reserve firefighters?
So I can comfortably say this because I've been on both sides now, active and Guard. When I was active duty, I looked at Guard and reserve firefighters, and I just thought to myself, look at these guys, these weekend warriors. It's just that stigma that they have, if you will.
What stigma is that?
That they're just weekend warriors. They do this 2 days a month.
Yeah.
They don't get the active duty side of it. But now that I'm on the other side, I have a completely different picture. Again, just some of the people that I work with are so incredibly intelligent and have the experience and the knowledge to back it up. I definitely don't look at it that way anymore.
Yeah, you probably have a little bit different opinion on active duty now that you stepped across the threshold and you're looking from the other side.
Absolutely.
Collectively, we're pretty young, but I think everybody adds value of some kind. Everybody comes from a different background. The value that the Guard guys add is obviously experience and a little bit of life experience and firefighting experience. And for us, maybe
Absolutely.
in the active duty, collectively we're young. And so there's a lot of excitement and drive and ambition that we can bring
Absolutely.
to the table with that youth. So how about Guard? I mean, if there's some Guard reserve firefighters listening to this, what are some things they can do maybe to improve a relationship between active duty and Guard reserve?
I feel like, regardless whether you're active or reserve, Guard, We all have one mission: save lives, protect property, and that's what we have to focus on. Sure, there's going to be some people with not as much experience, and there's going to be some people with just an abundant amount of experience. We just have to make sure that we're sharing that knowledge and that experience with the guys who may not have it. And the people who don't have the experience need to step out of their comfort zone and find those guys to gain that knowledge. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. In my opinion, no question is a dumb question when it comes to this job. We all have to be humble, because at any point in time, this job could take your life.
Yeah, humility seems to be a common theme in our episodes. I talked about it on our last episode, episode 4. Talked about it in episode 2 with Eric Barlow. I mean, if everybody can learn and apply humility, we'd be so much better collectively. And I think there's a lot of people out there that do. There's some people that maybe could work on it. But so as you're talking, I thought of another question. Do you guys run any calls on your Air National Guard base there in Maryland? Are you? Yeah, you do. You fit in with the base firefighters?
Absolutely. So it's a state-run organization, so it's a state fire department, and some of the members are members of the Guard as well. But when on drill weekends, we man the apparatus, while we're there during the daytime. They actually have a mutual aid agreement with the county fire department, so the potential to actually run calls while we're there exists. I've ran a few car crashes right off post. A few weekends ago, there was I think there was a building fire of some sort, off base, but they got called to it. So that potential for actually doing the job while we're on drill weekend exists, and kind of gives you a little bit of excitement, going in there knowing that you can see some work while you're there.
Yeah, you get to step away from your CBTs and actually do something. So there's probably listeners that are interested in joining the reserve or Guard. And I know that I've had firefighters within the departments I've been at that have wanted to make that transition. Obviously, I knew you made that transition. I got some guys now that work with me that want to do it. So what's some advice you can give to listeners who may be interested in transitioning to the reserve or to the Guard?
So don't be afraid to do it. It's not as bad as what people might make it out to be. There can be times where it can be a little trying. Just either it's a long day and you're sitting at a computer doing CBTs, or you're doing hands-on training, which is all right with me. I could do that all day long, but it's definitely a different world, if you will, when it comes to active and Guard. I always like to think of the comparison where some people say in active duty, you say, oh, hey, Sergeant so-and-so, and they're like, oh, hello, Airman so-and-so. And then the Guard side, it's like, oh, hey, Bob, hey, Jim. That's not necessarily the case. But it is a little bit of a culture shock because it is different.
So what about certifications? If a guy or gal trying to set themselves up for the Guard Reserve, are certifications similar? Do they transfer over? Is there something somebody can do maybe to set themselves apart? Or
certification-wise, we get the same. We have the opportunity to get the same certifications as active duty. A lot of guys who are civilian firefighters elsewhere, they get their instructor, their inspectors, their officer certifications, through their departments or through other organizations. It may not be CDC based, but it's still all transferable certifications, pro board certifications. And, they're just as good as all the IFSEC certifications that we get. So as far as setting up for success, I'm required to be certified to a certain level if I want to promote. It's plain and simple.
Yeah, man. I assume that was the answer. I assume the certifications were pretty transferable, but I don't know if there was something I was missing. But hey, what about fitness? Do you guys have to take physical fitness tests like we do in active duty? You have to do it once a year?
Absolutely. So, right. We're required to do it once a year, and we're not. So if I remember correctly on active duty, and maybe it's changed, but if you guys get below a 90, is it you have to do it every 6 months?
That's right. Yeah. Every 6
Okay.
months, 1 year if you're above a 90.
Sure. So guard side, even if you get below a 90, as long as you pass it, it's still required once a year, or it's only required once a year.
Yeah. And they're actually in our career field in fire protection. This is probably on the active duty side, but they're looking to do what they call a tier 2 fitness test, where if you're a master sergeant and below, you'll have to do a firefighter specific fitness test, kind of like the CPAP. I think it's different than that. It might be similar. I'm not sure. They're developing down in San Antonio right now. We'll probably see it by 2021, 2022 or so, but they're going to that pretty soon. I don't know if that's going to go over to the guard. I'm sure it will. I think things take a little bit longer, but Matt, thanks so much for joining me today and sharing your experiences in the Air Force and some insight into the Guard. Hopefully this discussion and others like it can help to strengthen our relationship between the Guard and active duty. We both have a lot to offer, and I think we're a lot more similar than we sometimes think. So do you have any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I don't think we're as different as some people might think we are. Again, we have to do all the same training, the same boring CBTs, but at the end of the day, we all have one mission, and that's just what we have to remember. But before I go, I know that you guys are kind of footing the bill for this podcast, and I would like to donate $20 to your cause. I like what you guys are doing. I think it's a good thing, and I think people are going to learn a lot from it. So I would like to donate the next month's fees, whatever that may be, to you guys to ensure that this podcast keeps going.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. Yeah, we hope to add value to everybody too, and yeah, we are coming out of pocket. It is a private endeavor, so we appreciate anything we can get, man. I really do appreciate that, Matt.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad you enjoy it. I'm glad you came on. So it was a pleasure talking to you.
You too, Matt.
It was great talking with Matt and getting his insight today. It's not too often active duty, guard, or reserve firefighters have conversations other than on deployments and sometimes when we see each other on training. Our intent here was to find common ground with all total force partners so that we can better understand each other. As Matt and I mentioned a few times during our discussion, we're likely much more similar than we think. I think something as simple as a conversation like we had can help provide perspective for both of us. There are many times throughout the episode I use the words guard and reserve interchangeably, as if they're the same thing. I realize there are differences that I may not completely understand. So please excuse my ignorance, but on that note, let us know if you'd like to come on and provide your perspective. I know there's a lot that Matt and I didn't cover, and everyone has some kind of value to add. What's it like in the reserves if you're a reservist? What's it like at different guard locations? What can you share that would help people across the enterprise? After all, the intent of this podcast is to help Air Force firefighters across the world. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fire Dog Podcast. You can find more content just like this regularly posted to our Facebook page at facebook.com/the Fire Dog Podcast. That's facebook.com/the Fire DAWG Podcast. Please like, subscribe, share with your friends and coworkers. And don't forget to rate this episode wherever you listen to your podcasts. This is host Matt Wilson and guest Matt Portka. Until next time, stay safe.